Hey everyone, this is Romain from RainPhotosClub.com. If you're new here, welcome to the club, and if you are coming back, then welcome back. Today we have a manual settings tutorial, and this is all about aperture and how that affects your depth of field. So yeah, we're going to dive right into that. So for those of you who don't know what aperture or depth of field is, we're basically going to take this photo and we are going to turn it into this photo. So it's understanding how we do that, and by the end of the tutorial you'll be able to have either a shallow or deep depth of field in your photo. So first of all, what is aperture? So aperture is the hole in your camera that basically can get bigger or smaller according to an f-stop. So an f-stop is a measurement of your aperture as seen in the diagram. So it goes from f1.4, it can go even lower than f1.4, but basically f1.4 to f16 is shown in the diagram. And yeah, so two things are going to happen when you do this. The first thing that is going to affect is how much light is entering into your camera, which means that it'll make your image either lighter or darker. So obviously the bigger the circle is, or the wider the aperture is, which is f1.4, the more light that's going to come into your photo. As opposed to an f16, which is a much smaller circle, which means a lot less light is going to come into your circle. That's the first thing it's going to affect, but the other thing it's going to affect is depth of field. So what is depth of field? So depth of field is the amount of your image that is actually in focus. So it depends on where you are focusing in your image, and it'll be how much in front and behind that subject that you've decided to focus on is in focus. So when you have an aperture of f16, you will have a deeper depth of field. In other words, more of your photo will be in focus. Whereas when you have an aperture of f1.4 or f2.2, for instance, it's a much shallower depth of field, which means that much less of your image is going to be in focus. So wherever you focus is going to have to be a lot more accurate, and you're going to have to make sure that you're focusing where you want to focus. So now that we have a better understanding of what aperture and depth of field are, we're going to go back to our original photos and we're going to figure out how we got to these results. So first off, I haven't changed any other settings besides the aperture and then other manual settings to make sure that the exposure is correct. Because as I mentioned, when you make your aperture wider or narrower, you're either making the image lighter or darker because you're allowing less light or more light in according to the aperture you're using. So you then have to adjust other settings to make sure that your exposure is still correct. In other words, that the photo is correctly lit. So those are the only settings I've changed. It is important to know that because if you click on the link at the top here, there's another video which shows you how other settings such as being closer to your subject or the background being further away or zooming in can also affect the overall look of your photo and make it, make that blurry, make your background more or less blurry. It's kind of the same effect that you're getting here. So it's just important to know that I've used exactly the same settings here for aperture. So all I've changed here is the aperture and manual settings. So the first photo is f11. And I focused on the lavender in the front. And as you can see, the lavender behind it is a little bit... it's not quite in focus, but it's still like there's a lot of detail. We can see what it is. And then as you go further and further back into the photo, you can see that it's getting more and more blurry. So this is the depth of field gradually tapering off and the focus basically getting less and less. So that's the first photo. In the second photo, I've used f2.2. So again, I focused on the lavender in the front. And then you can still sort of see the lavender in the back, but it's less in focus than in the first photo. There's a lot less detail, and then again, as you get further and further back, the focus gets less and less, so it becomes more and more blurry. So this is all, this is basically what depth of field is and how we manipulate it. So it just gives you a better idea of how you can use this. You will notice probably that if you are using a kit lens that came with your camera, then you won't be able to go to f2.2. So f2.2 is a really fast, this is why some of the more expensive lenses are called fast lenses, because they can go to apertures of f2.8, 2.2 and lower, and it's often why they're more expensive. because they're great for low light, and pros like to use them, and they like to get this nice creamy background effect in their photos. So that's it for the Aperture introduction. I hope that this has helped you to kind of understand what Aperture is and what it does. If you aren't subscribed yet, please do hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you can get notified whenever we have free tutorials. We do post free tutorials very regularly. You can also go to the website renphotosclub.com and you can have access to free tutorials here, or you can opt for the paid option, which allows you to then get feedback on your photos and helps you to improve, basically like coaching. Otherwise, please leave us a comment in the comment section. We would love to hear from you and what you would like to hear more about in terms of photography. And happy photo making, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.